everyone. My name is Hillary Flint, and I am the PA Organizing Manager at the Center for Oil and Gas Organizing. Today, we are here with Amanda Zahner to talk about her experience at the recent AI Summit in Pittsburgh. So, welcome to Behind the Hype, What We Learned at the AI Energy Conference. I will turn it over to Amanda to introduce herself and get going with the presentation. So, thanks for being here, Amanda.
Hi, thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Amanda Zahner. I'm an advocacy cell with Rivers Waterkeeper, and I'm gonna switch to presentation mode now. Do- How's that quality for everyone? Can you see it?
It's taking just a moment. Oh, there it is. Perfect.
All right, thank you so much. So yes, thank you so much for the opportunity. First to have gone to the conference and then also to, share with everyone about this experience. Um, I kind of used my previous role in research and policy spaces as like my reason for being there around like energy and environmental sustainability in policy. And so that was kind of my lead for, my title for why I was there. The conference was held in Washington County at Hilton Hotel in South Point. And it's the second conference that was held in the series so far, with the previous one being in Bakery Square over in spring. And they have plans to hold more in the future. And kind of like setting the scene, it was very interesting going in. I think definitely because a lot of the attendants came in the night prior. There was a mixer for them. They already knew each other coming in, and um, it was very like laid back. There wasn't anyone kind of looking at the check-in, so I kind of just grabbed my name tag and started mingling. But there was roughly 60 people in attendance, and it was all kind of utility servicers, construction, trade, transport, asset management, and kind of the services end. And a lot of the attendants actually commented on no developers have been present so far at the conferences thus far. And a few people did mention that there was the demonstration outside. I had one attendee actually ask me when she found out that I was from the area about people's thoughts um, about demonstrations and protests, if they had been done before. And so it was very interesting, very, I guess, fresh to have that kind of engaging conversation. But when we went into kind of the opening of the conference, it was very a little disarming and very eye-opening. They came in right away with a video from Senator McCormick, who couldn't be there in person, kind of right off the bat iterating how control over AI and data center development is an arms race and how we're in competition with China, and how, particularly for Pennsylvania and the Appalachian region, it's kind of the single most important ingredient to provide natural gas for AI and data center development use. And that the region has to lead to protect the energy future and also national security future. So it felt very dystopian going in, especially with remarks from the keynote speaker, Richard DeClaudio, who leads the Energy Innovation Center Institute. He opened with this kind of hypothetical position, talking about this Universe 25 experiment, which is in reference to biological experiment that contained a utopia for rats, where the rats were given everything that they wanted and had an abundance. But there was an inevitable collapse with, population overgrowth. And he used this to segue about the event horizon with AI development and a quotable impending population bubble that the world will hit at some point in the near future, to very much feed this idea that AI is an inevitable progression and that if the US wants to continue being secure and continue leading, then it has to take control over its development, um, claiming that sovereignty depends on the control of generative AI and things like that. And then also very much citing how the development and continuation of generative AI would lead to trends in differencing for work and demographic transitions. Everyone at the conference very much cited that there are labor vacancies in trade work and how data center development and AI growth would create a new incentive and space for skilled trades to remain essential. Um, and they also kind of kept pointing to how, with the inevitability of AI creating cognitive surplus or phasing out certain jobs, that it would recenter the opportunity for well-being and human dignity to be repositioned in American values. So while some jobs would be phased out and while work trends would change, it would ultimately create new value for the nation, was very much a line of thinking throughout the conference. And so this kind of funneled into discussion about how workforce and education investments would really push for training, especially at the youth level. Um, and they iterated a need for regulatory stability and incentives within regional development and kept reinforcing that both Virginia and Ohio were leading compared to Pennsylvania, and how the regulatory environment in PA was less desirable. But they also noted that permitting in PA alone has been up since August by 30% in terms of speed and permitting for data center related projects. So I thought that was an interesting note, and I think something that they wanted to see continue to increase. And so the conference was then like kind of broken down between different panels for manufacturing, cooling systems, trade work, and different energy integrations. Um, and the conference kind of themed around build, not buy, and producing in the US and prioritizing domestic manufacturing over international. And the company Emerson kind of showcased an AI model that would provide management systems to integrate for different plants, be it data center, nuclear, or coal, to kind of like optimize their systems and show how AI could work with people, not against it, and be deployed for like rapid development. And then they talked a lot about supply chain and permitting challenges, with the timelines of like power turbines and different like utility needs. They kept iterating that developers are looking for ways that they can build the fastest. And so when a site like Homer City says that they'll be up and running by 2027, they won't be operating at max capacity at that time. They'll start at a much like lower energy production rate with what equipment that they can get in by that time. And then within a 3 to 5 year time range, they'll reach a higher and higher level of energy production for their data. And then they also did acknowledge concerns for grid capacity, ratepayer burdens, and also potential for data centers to contribute energy to the grid. Um, One person in this panel did emphasize his input on ratepayer utility prices. He said that rising prices wasn't anything new, and he emphasized that he did not think it was the data centers would be contributing a higher cost than already on current trends. Um, and so they emphasized ways that data centers could contribute to the grid versus just putting a strain on it. And they also did dip into discussion of potentials when it comes to sustainable practices like heat waste and CO2 sequestration and kind of what they call co-locating. So it being both a data center, but then also um, like processing wastewater or sequestering CO2 and kind of having multiple benefits at one site. But the experts very much iterated this is an ideal and not a current practice, and it would take several years for developers to integrate these into their practices when it comes to data center management. Um, and they also iterated again how policy and permitting was lagging and behind enthusiasm, and that they wanted to press for the need of a favorable policy environment versus just excitement and controversy in the press. And then for development and regional advocacy, IUOE, they have local chapters for training and skill partnerships where they fully fund like trade development and skills building at different sites throughout the US. None based in Pennsylvania, but they have some sites in North Carolina and Texas, I believe. Um, but this chapter emphasized focus on localized benefits through community job creation. And while it wasn't clear cut, they iterated how it would service local job creation on the sites. And Washington County's commissioner also had a like small section throughout the conference, and he just very much emphasized that we have the energy here, we have the water, we have the land, um, and that he very much wanted people to come bring their money um, to the area with these developments. Was his input for the conference. And then a lot of knowledge, I think, and like expertise was found in the cooling systems section of the conference and explaining the technicalities. Um, and point blank, the panel just said water is always the most efficient form of cooling, especially for hyperscale data centers. And they outlined a hierarchy of kind of how developers think about choosing where to place their locations. They first prioritize how and where they're going to get their power. So if they have a pre-existing grid connection, pre-existing pipelines, that's the best option that they're looking for. And so primarily they're going to look at brownfield sites and areas that already have connectivity, like the Homer City development point. Um, And then cooling is always considered last, is what a representative from Munters iterated. They iterated a consumption point that data centers pull 2 to 3% off the grid uh, yearly by 2030. But I've had some conversations and research in some other areas that this is still a very low and conservative estimate. And in terms of scale and water use, the ballpark is that there is 8 to 10 million gallons per day for large data center uses. And a systems engineer for cooling management iterated that that's just the cost. The water supply is here. It's readily available and it's relatively high quality, especially in a lot of the PA sites that they're looking at. And so, in terms of referencing potential pollution and kind of exhaustion and evaporation of water, they very much said, like, that's just the cost. The water's here. It's always going to be the best use. And they broke down that, especially with evaporative cooling systems, which is kind of the more standard practice with hyperscale centers and larger data center areas now, is a system where the water is just constantly flowing at all times, and that the water and generating system won't be shut off at any point due to the speed that data centers and the data chips need to be started very quickly. Um, through this process, there's about a third of the water used gets turned into blow down waste, so contaminated, and then has to be processed. And a lot of that contains salts, silica, and then different refrigerants that are added to the cooling systems to protect the data chips throughout the process. And one comment that I thought was very interesting is that the representatives iterated that this would require on-site treatment both before use into the cooling systems and then after. And the representative from Munster's iterated that private companies will become the largest wastewater treatment plants. They may not know it yet, but this will be a reality. So I thought that was very interesting remark to see how that would be the case. And then again, they iterated that there's a preference for high quality water sources, so pre-existing sites that they won't have to treat water as excessively. And then also throughout the conference, they iterated that with permitting challenges and pushback from the public, it's ideal to locate away from population centers and also where they can put multiple centers with relatively short distance from one another. Um, and so it kind of hit very hard because one representative said that Homer City was the new locale on the bingo card in terms of being away from large population centers and away from people, where the center would impact and have pushback. And again, they kind of conceptualize sustainability practices and what would be ideal in the future in terms of using CO2 sequestration practices and then also re-injecting the wastewater back into coal seams for the natural gas project process. But they iterated that this isn't going to be a standard practice for years to come. It's an ideal sustainability route, and that we're not going to see most developers implement this, if at all, or for years to come. They did iterate there would be some ideal trends in terms of energy and water and cooling systems used, and that ideally a system would be closed looped and immersive, so kind of self-contained or using refrigerants to replace water. And one of the representatives iterated that crypto mining is kind of setting the trend in experimenting for what they will use and how they can treat. And so seeing any crypto mine spots pop up will be where they're kind of implementing those newer trends. But fast startup times are valued over energy and water use efficiencies ultimately. And they also led like some announcing of major projects throughout the Appalachian Basin and PA in general. They emphasized that Homer City will be one of the biggest projects and the tech fusion site as well, along with investment from Frontier Group and Shippingsport and Connellsville, Ohio as well. EQT has kind of bought into almost all of the projects throughout PA and um, has, bought in to be the major gas supplier for these data center locations. uh, Blackstone bought into First Energy and some other sites throughout counties in PA as well. Um, and they also iterated that banking institutions are currently leading and will be continue to lead in AI investments. One representative issued that it's the canary in the coal mine for consumer AI in terms of purchasing data center use and kind of taking the most energy to use for their systems from these partnerships. And so with a regional outlook, they kept iterating that energy demands and workforce needs will continue to surge. And so PA should jump on the ship and really find a way to service this and benefit from the growth. and that the water and power availability is what is driving development throughout Appalachia and what should drive more centers popping up in PA. Um, and they continually iterated that there's a need for competitive regulation reform and policy development. Um, and that AI will be kind of a bellwether for other industries to come to the area and lead to more economic prosperity. Um, very much a the demand won't change. We have to accommodate and grow mindset. Um, and a lot of the members were very excited to have more conferences. The next one is projected to be in May, with EQT, PGM, and Liberty Energy potentially joining in on the conference. Um, and that they were really emphasizing that the region is poised for massive infrastructure and workforce transformation. And so PA has to kind of take it by storm, so to speak. Um, So yeah, that's kind of a big overview of everything. Happy to talk more in specifics and jump back to anything on the slides as needed. I know I went a little bit faster, but happy to talk more.
That was great, Amanda. Thank you.